Anyway, now we've come to the session for our keynote speech for today. Before we start the session, let me first and foremost introduce the speaker for today, who is Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Zakri Abdul Hamid. Now, Professor Zakri, since 2010, has been the science advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. His other concurrent roles include Joint Chairman, Malaysian Industrie Government Group for High Technology MIT, Chairman for Malaysian Bioeconomy Development Corporation, Chairman National Professors Council, Chairman Board of Advisors UNU International Institute on Global Health, Pro-Chancellor University Perguruan Sultan Idris, and Chairman of the Board of Directors University of Malaya, which he assumed recently. From 2001-2005, Professor Zakri has co-chaired the UN mega study entitled Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. He is the founding chairman of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and a member of the UN Secretary-General Scientific Advisory Board. He sits on the Global Leadership Council of the Sustainable Development Solution Network, and he has been appointed too by the United Nations as the co-chairman of SDI Advisory Board of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Tan Sri Zakri's professional interests include crop science, biodiversity, and science diplomacy. He has received numerous awards, among others, Fulbright Hays Fellowship in 1981, Rotary Research Foundation Gold Medal Award in 1999, ISS AES Matsuda Award in 2013, ASEAN Meritorious Services Award 2014, Zayed International Prize for the Environment 2014, the Academy of Science of South Africa Distinguished Visiting Scholar Award in 2015, and Merdeka Award for the Environment category in 2015. In Malaysia, he has been conferred the rank of Senior Fellow by the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, which carry the title of Academician in 2015. He has been conferred honorary doctorate by various universities such as UMT, University Sultan Mizan, University Putra Malaysia, and University of Nottingham. He has also been conferred Datuk-ship in 1991, Datuk Sri in 2012, and Tan Sri in 2014. In January 2017, the US-based Biofuel Digest, which is an influential industry magazine, has hailed him as one of the top 100 influential persons in the advanced bioeconomy 2017. Now, interestingly, there were 3 species that have been named after his name: a beetle, Pallosophera zakri, a cicada, which is a Famphonia zakri, and a pitcher plant, Nepenthes zakriana. A very interesting finding indeed that I've recently discovered. So without further ado, I would like to hand the floor over to Yang Bahagia Tan Sri Zakri to share with us on the developing human capital in emerging economy for Industry 4.0. Tan Sri, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia Prof. Dr. Khairia Muhammad Yusof, Chairman World Engineering Education Forum 2017, Chairman Prof. Ibrahim. Let me also welcome Professor Michael Auer, President of the IFEES, and Dr. Hans Hoyer, the Executive Secretary. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Very good morning to all of you. In particular, let me extend a very warm welcome to our foreign guests who had traveled a long way to be here in Kuala Lumpur and also in Malaysia. If there's one country with a tremendous amount of diversity, not only in terms of its natural resources, but also the people, this is the country where through historical development, the convergence of the great civilization of the world, namely the Chinese, the Indian, and eventually the European converge in Malaysia. So we are very familiar with diversity, but what we are also very proud of as Malaysians is to profess to be united in our diversity. Ladies, thank you so much for the generous introduction, Professor Ibrahim. I hope I can do justice to your commendation, but let me also thank Professor Auer for your introduction of the subject. My topic is developing future human capital in emerging economies for Industry 4.0, and I'll be relating to what we are doing in Malaysia today and also for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, before we embark on the Industry 4.0 and how we look at it in Malaysia, I would like to draw your attention to you on some of the global challenges that we have been facing for some time. And let me bring you to the year 2015, when the world comes together to agree on a number of mega resolutions. I think the first one was the international meeting on disaster risk reduction in Japan, which illustrates to us all, despite our advances, we are still a biological species, and we are subject to the whims and fancies of nature. And Professor Auer, you're exactly correct when you quote Charles Darwin, that it's not the strength of a species, but how we adapt to change. Secondly, I think the Paris Conference on Climate Change in 2015, where the world comes together to develop sort of a strategy and working plan to address climate change. So that is also very significant, because when it comes to such kind of phenomenon, it's not so much the science and the technology and the engineering that's important, but also the need for understanding among the people, in particular the political leaders. So the first take-home lesson I want to share with you today, as you deliberate on engineering education, would be how do you interact with the policymakers, with the politicians, with the public, to illustrate what needs to be done in the engineering field. And thirdly, in 2015, the global community, in particular UN member states, came together to agree on the so-called Sustainable Development Goals, or what is also known as the the 2030 Development Agenda, where we commit ourselves to develop, to come up with a sustainable world by 2030. I listed all those happening in 2015 because I wanted to put it in context that this kind of gathering, this kind of community is very crucial to the future survival of the global community. You can talk about the nuts and bolts of engineering education over the next 3 days. You can talk about the kind of publication that you would produce so that you could become associate professors or professors. But the lessons learned is to be relevant to your society, to your nation, and eventually to the global community. As the good professor was summarizing his talk just now, he also mentioned about the fact that we are really a global village, isn't it? So we are really neighbors, you know. So the future of the earth belongs to all of us. So that's my mukaddimah or introduction. Let me just say that as we move towards the fourth industrial revolution, the transformation around the world will be fueled in a large part by technology, engineering, and advancement in science. And I don't have to repeat what Professor Awa was saying. These changes are creating ripple effects that impact societies and their institutions and their economies. The convergence of the technologies is likely to entirely transform the ways in which we live, work, and interact with one another. So taking stock of these new technologies, as well as their disruption potential, is critical for all nations, and especially developing small countries like Malaysia. In the years to come, research and innovation will play an even more central role in our knowledge-driven economy. We are shifting towards high-tech, knowledge-intensive, high value-added and capital-intensive ventures. So that is a challenge for us. For Malaysia, in order to be competitive, this country needs a workforce to build, and we need an excellent workforce in terms of competencies and skills that people possess. We need to be prepared for a rapidly changing and increasingly interconnected and technology-rich world, a world where there will be many new opportunities, but where there will also be disruption across many industries, but where there will also be disruption across many industries that could also impact people's livelihood. All of this creates a need for greater career flexibility. For this country, we are grappling with a number of issues. One of the major issues which I'm pretty sure that this forum is going to deliberate on is, of course, the area of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. To me, that is the core area, and maybe a bit more. For instance, for Malaysia, lots of efforts need to be taken to increase the number of researchers, scientists, and engineers in the country. The RSE per 10,000 people. The number globally for the industrialized country range from 80 to 120 packs per 10,000 workers, but in this country, we are a mere 56 people per 10,000 workforce. So you can imagine the gap that we have to reach out. This is an issue that can no longer be ignored. Science is one of Malaysia's greatest resources. In the future, will not be able to compete on the world stage with low labor costs or by exploiting our natural resources. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, for advancement, we also need to invest in R&D. Again here, Malaysia is not doing too well, although it has one of the higher percentage of investment of R&D among the developing countries. The 2015 figures of our gross expenditure on R&D or GERD per GDP in Malaysia is about 1.3%. This is, of course, low compared to industrialized countries like South Korea, which spend about 4%, Japan about 3.3%. And companies in Malaysia do not invest as heavily as firms do in other countries, investing significantly less than, for example, the 71% of US R&D funding coming from industry or 77% South Korean expenditure originating from the corporate sector. But all the same, ladies and gentlemen, we are not doing too badly if you compare our investment in R&D with those of the other developing countries. In particular, in the members of the Organization of Islamic Conference, about 57 countries worldwide, only 2 countries invest more than 1% of its GDP on R&D, and that is Turkey and Malaysia. I'm trying to illustrate this to show why investment in R&D is key if countries need to progress. Secondly, still on STEM, ladies and gentlemen, there was a policy introduced in 1967, this country, to have 60% students right through universities doing science and 40% in the non-sciences. But alas, the situation is not going to be that way. In fact, right now is the reverse, where we have almost 70% in the social sciences and 30% in the sciences. So that's a challenge too, which I hope this forum can provide some solutions. How do you encourage students to be more involved in science? Of course, the regular excuse would be saying the career path for the scientists is not clear. And science it will always be not a popular thing. And that is quite true. I have my own experience. I used to give interviews that appear on YouTube. If I got, well, let's recap. For some of the celebrities in Malaysia, they can even get 1.5 hits, 1.5 million hits. Nurhaliza, Siti Nurhaliza and all. I'd be lucky if my hits reach 200. No, I'm serious. That is only for me, and the others too. It's ridiculous. So I'm throwing that challenge to this forum, okay? Do something which can change that situation. But all the same, I was also informed this conundrum on STEM is not only happening to countries like Malaysia. I'm not sure about Germany or Japan or Korea, but others like the United States have that same problem too, right? But they can attract others, Malaysians and others, to come and work for them because they have the money. We don't have the money to pay distinguished professors here in the main, you know. So that is another problem. So I was informed that there are challenges to overcome. In order to overcome these challenges, the teaching of science must take a new orientation. The overall objective of the new approach in science teaching or engineering teaching and learning, I think, is to foster a living science as a dynamic force for societal improvement. That goes back to my earlier argument about linking what you're doing here with the Sustainable Development Goals. Also, our efforts must be geared towards the creation of a scientific mind. So far, science teaching, or I'm not sure about engineering, has remained in its traditional form, where sciences are taught for science sake, without showing much of its usefulness and practicality in everyday life. Currently, more often than not, in the classroom, scientific laws are learned, not discovered. Hypotheses are not tested, but taught. Such a curriculum does little to develop an attitude for a critical inquiry, adaptability, and objective understanding. Thus, the ability to critically observe, analyze, and conclude on everyday phenomenon has remained to be the exclusive realm of scientists alone. So how do we change this? Let me share with you some of the concerns in Malaysia. In fact, this STEM conundrum in Malaysia has got the attention of the Prime Minister himself. Prime Minister Najib believes that increasing the number of students in STEM should be made a national movement that needs long-term investment. And to him, it is a non-negotiable target that we must reach to ensure our competitiveness in the global arena. So during the tabling of the budget for 2018, recently, Mr. Najib has announced a 250 million ringgit endowment for the setting up of a STEM center to develop the latest learning methods to train STEM specialist teachers. The computer science module will also be enhanced to include coding program in primary and secondary school curriculum. These also include to upgrade 2,000 classes into a 21st century smart classroom in order to enhance creative-based learning and innovative thinking. This shows the government commitment to address the lack of interest on STEM education in this country, which is strongly associated with how science, mathematics, and engineering is taught. Ladies and gentlemen, the government is also committed to realize the importance of technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, transformation as a game changer in increasing competitiveness as well as improving the caliber of the workforce and the nation's economic development. So during the tabling the 2018 budget, the Prime Minister also announced a 4.9 billion ringgit sum to be allocated to implement the TVET Malaysia Master Plan in order to encourage TVET graduates to continue their studies. The government has prepared 100 TVET Excellent Student Scholarship worth 4.5 million ringgit. Besides that, all technical and vocational education training institutions previously under 7 ministries will be branded as TVET Malaysia and placed under the Human Resources Ministry. Ladies and gentlemen, as physician, and I want to get back to the issue raised by Professor Auer. As physician and writer George Crane claims, there is no future in any jobs. The future lies in the person who holds the job. If it is true, as futurist Thomas Frey predicts in 2011, 60% of the jobs that will exist 10 years from now have not been invented yet. And we know very well the WEEF Future of Jobs report, which estimated that 65% of children entering primary school today will end up doing job types that don't yet exist. And on average, by 2020, more than a third of the desired core skill sets of most occupation will be comprised of skills that are not yet considered crucial to the job today. So you can see the uncharted waters that we are entering. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of our education system, just like the future of the workplace, lies in its ability to embrace change. All young people need access to an education that allows them to realize their potential. Otherwise, we are simply wasting talent. Our education system also should not be too focused on producing narrow specialists. It cannot make sense to focus on equipping students only for specialized careers, including becoming academics themselves. So perhaps we need to have a reconsideration how we can examine these challenges and come up with a good set of recommendations. Further on, ladies and gentlemen, graduates in the future, as many people were saying, should become job creators rather than job seekers. In other words, future graduates of institutes of higher learning will no longer just depend on government or the private sector, but they may be able to create jobs for others. The world needs new ideas, innovative solutions, and visionary leaders who can make it happen as job creators and entrepreneurs. We are also preparing the education system to support the ongoing re-qualification of the industrial workforce, recognizing the need for training to take place in more settings than only the traditional off-site location. This support could include providing online learning platforms and access to free courses at so-called open universities. Universities can also offer free, high-quality, massive open online courses or MOOC in programming to all citizens. Those are some of my thoughts. I just want to conclude by saying that this is a difficult journey which requires careful coordination. We must make it step by step, building wide consensus over the role of education both now and in the future to ensure that young people can thrive in an ever increasingly complex and interconnected world. I just want to end by referring to some of the thoughts of the Malaysian Prime Minister on education, which relates to this forum. Number one, from my own experience again, as science advisor to the Prime Minister, his assignment to me is very simple. Can science, technology, or engineering create jobs for the people? Secondly, jobs, and thirdly, jobs. It's a politician. Secondly, can science and engineering create wealth, prosperity for the people or rakyat? So that's how a politician thinks, you know. Very simple, but very challenging, right? So in the midst of the Industries 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution, Najib's view is very simple. He said the training of future young Malaysians must be to develop their critical thinking skill. So it's not what they learn, but how they learn. It's not what, but how. So that they can be well equipped to address challenges facing our world today. I think it's very flexible, very visionary, and it also converges with some of the top 10 skills identified by the World Economic Forum that are needed by our students. And among those, there are 4 which I find resonating very well, and these are the ability to solve complex problems. Second, critical thinking. Third, creativity. And fourth, cognitive flexibility. So having said all that, in this country too, we are very conscious of the role of ethics. This is championed by Professor Zul of USM. I think education, besides the nuts and bolts of engineering or what have you, must also infuse on the elements of ethics and morality. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my view. I've spoken for 27 minutes, so if we need to have a Q&A, I would welcome that most, but not, it is okay. But I would like to reiterate again to this group, what you're doing, even your teaching modalities, must be interesting to the student, must be forward-looking, and must offer them a sense of hope. But eventually, the need to create a mindset which is critical, which is transparent, which is objective, is almost a sacrosanct thing to do. So once again, let me congratulate this August gathering for having the audacity to organize this conference. I'm sure there will be many ideas that's going to come up at the end of your meeting, and I look forward to receive them in due course so that I can bring to the attention of the policy makers. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are not living in a cocoon or in isolation. Whatever we do here has relevance to the world outside there. But of course, these are the key questions, you know, to influence the policymakers. So once again, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah.
You stay on stage.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Nak bagi apa.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Yang Bagi Tan Sri, for the very insightful and interesting speech or thoughts that you have shared with us. I think there's a lot of challenges, loads of challenges that we all as academics have to sort of bring on board and consider in moving forward. Yeah, and at times I feel it's quite scary too, Tan Sri. We look at the pace of changes, but there is challenges, and we all have to move with it. Right, I would now like to welcome Professor Michael on stage to hand over a token of appreciation to our keynote speaker, Tan Sri Zakri. Please, Professor Michael. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we've come to the end of the session, and now we are due for break. Okay, right. Thank you. And I hope you have enjoyed the session as much as I do. Thank you.